Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we're going to jump right into a topic that's all around us every single day, but we don't always stop and think about it: the relationship between men and women.
So you've probably heard that old saying, right? That men are from Mars and women are from Venus. It's kind of a funny way to talk about how different we can seem, but is that really true? I mean, how deep do these differences actually go? Let's get into it.
Now, here's the deal. I'm not here to give you any answers. Instead, we're going to explore this together. We're going to use 10 really powerful questions to help us all figure out our own ideas about gender, about society, and, about ourselves.
Think of these questions as our guide for today. They're designed to make us think, to reflect, and, maybe even see things from a totally new angle. So, you ready? Let's jump into the first one.
All right, question number 1. This one's all about stereotypes. Those oversimplified ideas we have about an entire group of people? So, when you hear that word, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Okay, let's break this down a bit. Think about the characters you see in movies or on TV. What about jobs? Do people ever talk about men's jobs versus women's jobs? And what about those phrases we hear all the time, like boys don't cry? Is that really fair to boys? And telling girls to be quiet, how could that be harmful? So really, the idea here is to think about where these ideas even come from and what kind of impact they have on us.
So where do we even pick up these ideas in the first place? A lot of the time, it starts right at home. And that brings us perfectly to our second question, which is all about your own experience with family.
Just think about your everyday life growing up. At home, who was always asked to do the dishes or clean up? Who was allowed to stay out later? Parents often say things like, "I'm just worried about your safety." But is that the whole picture? It's really interesting to just stop and think about the reasons we're given for these different rules. Okay, so let's step outside the family home for a minute and think about our public lives, like at school and at work. How did these sort of unwritten rules change how we act or even how other people see us? What's wild is just how subtle these expectations can be, right? Think about a group project. Who just kind of naturally takes charge and who gets asked to take the notes? Or think about emotions. If a man gets angry at work, he might be seen as passionate. But if a woman does, she might be called too emotional. A woman in charge might get labeled bossy, while a man doing the exact same thing is called a strong leader. All right, this next one gets a little more personal. We've been talking about society, but now let's bring it back to you. What kinds of expectations have people put on you just because you're a man or a woman? Has anyone ever said your hobby was weird for your gender? Or maybe pushed you toward a certain career because you're a man or a woman? Maybe you've gotten comments about how you should dress or wear your hair. But the most important part of this is that last bit. How did it actually make you feel? And which of those expectations do you just flat out reject? All right, let's switch gears and talk about the classroom. This is a huge debate. Should boys and girls learn together in the same classes, or should they be in separate, single-sex schools? What do you think? And look, you can argue this both ways, for sure. Putting everyone in the same class helps boys and girls learn to work together from a young age. But some people argue that separate classes might mean fewer distractions and better focus on schoolwork. But then, does that cause problems later on when they have to go out into a world where men and women work together all the time? Okay, let's zoom out for a second and look at the big picture. Gender equality. So, have we actually achieved it? Are we there yet? This question is asking you to look at things with both hope and a critical eye. On one hand, you can definitely see the progress, right? We see more women in leadership positions, in government, in business. We have laws that are supposed to guarantee equal pay. But then you look at the gaps. At home, Are chores and childcare really shared equally? And at work, does everyone truly get the same shot at success? It's so important to see both sides of the coin here, how far we've come and how far we still have to go.
Okay, this next one can be a little tricky. It's that classic idea of nature versus nurture. What actually makes men and women different? Is it something we're born with in our biology, or is it something society teaches us?
This slide lays it out perfectly. Biological just means it comes from nature. The absolute clearest example is that women can give birth and men can't. Social means it's something we've learned from our culture. I mean, a perfect example is color. There is nothing in nature that says blue is for boys and pink is for girls. That's 100% an idea society made up. So, can you think of any other examples for each of these categories?
Okay, building on that idea, let's zoom in specifically on the experience of women. What do you think are some of the unique advantages and also disadvantages for women in today's world?
So let's try to fill out this table in our heads for a second. On the advantages side, maybe it's more socially okay for women to show their feelings or to build really close friendships. But on the disadvantages side, women often have to think more about their personal safety or feel that intense pressure to choose between their career and starting a family. What else comes to mind for you? What would you add?
All right, now let's flip the coin. It's really easy to overlook the pressures guys face because, honestly, they're not always talked about. So what are the pros and cons for men?
On the advantages side, men might not get as much judgment for putting their career first, or they might feel safer walking alone at night. But then you flip it over to the disadvantages, there's this huge pressure to always be the strong one, to never show sadness or fear, and there's often this unspoken expectation to be the main breadwinner. I mean, these are some seriously heavy burdens, and we just don't talk about them enough.
And here we are, our final question. And honestly, it's a big one. It's about conflict, sure, but more importantly, it's about finding solutions. Where do these misunderstandings even start, and how can we start building more bridges instead of walls?
You know, a lot of the time, conflict starts with something small, a simple misunderstanding, or the feeling that chores at home just aren't being shared fairly. So how do we start to fix this? Well, the answers might be simple, but they're not always easy. It could be about learning to communicate more openly and maybe listening a little more. It could also mean bigger things, like companies creating policies that are fair to everyone. When you really boil it down, it almost always comes back to one thing: mutual respect.
Wow, okay. We've covered a lot of ground today. We've thought about stereotypes, family, work, and our society as a whole. So to wrap this whole thing up, I want to leave you with one last question to take with you. This isn't about finding some huge answer that solves everything. It's about one small, simple action. Maybe it's just asking a friend about their day and really listening, or reading an article from a different perspective. So I'll just leave you with that. What's your one small thing gonna be? Thanks so much for exploring all this with me today.
Beyond norm input and output training to achieve English speaking and writing skills that AI cannot replace.